Hey, on today's episode, well, I don't think it's really an episode, but like another video or whatever, we're going to be covering Marisa. I got a good amount of requests for this one, so I figured we could do this one next. If you have any other suggestions, feel free to let me know in the comment section below. I'll look through them as best I can. But anyway, Marisa. In a world where we have so many infantry sword units, why bother building her? Marisa is, at the very least, because of her recent refine, is able to stand on her own relatively well. It basically is a wooed out slang edge with additional attack and speed and times pulse, which can be really good for someone like her. Especially given her stats, she would like all the extra attack and speed she could get because her stat line is a bit outdated at 30 base attack and then 36 speed, which is still relatively good speed, keep in mind. However, if you get to the point where you're merging her up, you're giving her flowers, you can alleviate the issue as she'll go from 30 base attack to 38 base attack and 44 speed, which is a decent amount, all things considered. And then if you were to combine that with her preferred weapon, that's an additional 21 attack because of the 5 she gets from her bonus, and then the 16 light weapon. She gets 5 more speed. She also gets true damage of her special procs. She has a lot going for her, which is why it's going to be interesting when I recommend some of these builds, because it may seem kind of contradictory to her overall weapon. But if we were to go over to Aether raids first, we could discuss those builds. Although I guess that means this is the perfect time for us to segue into the Aether raids builds. The reason we're taking her on Astra mostly has to do with the 6th slot that we have that not only grants additional attack, because it's Reagan who opens the slot, but we also have Plumeria who can stack up more speed on her. So she has the best of both worlds when it comes to her 2 important stats, those being attack and speed. Now I'm sure you've seen this build so many times by now, to the point where it's just a fairly standard, it's the build that needs no introduction. You have distant counter with Spurn and Pulse Smoke and attack speed solo. And basically, she's just going to be Spurn tanking a lot of the time. And because of her true damage and wooed out, on top of the extra attack she gets, and on top of the true damage she also gets from Spurn, she can easily be doing 12 additional points of true damage, which is really strong. And then because she has Slang, she can heal for more than a lot of her contemporaries can. So she can make for a relatively good Spurn tank, especially since her HP is high. The only thing I would worry about is getting hit by a bunch of magic, because 28 base res isn't necessarily the highest, and because she's running Spurn, she has no means of preventing auto follow-ups from units such as Bramimond, but luckily we're not running her in that season, so we don't have to worry. And then we have something for Gale Force support. Basically the idea is you'll have one main unit that will initiate combat and then get into the Wings of Mercy range after a bit or two. That's when Marisa flies in with Wings of Mercy, goes with the Flashing Blade 4 effect, and procs her Gale Force. Now, because she has Slang in her weapon and Times Pulse, she automatically starts with a 3 cooldown Gale Force. Then on top of Times Pulse, which can activate on the first turn alongside it, and Quick Impulse, it becomes a 1-turn Gale Force. And the reason we have Flashing Blade, even though it's going to be 1 turn, is because it can go past guard effects and make it neutral cooldown, which is important, especially when Gale Forcing. So that's why we have the Flashing Blade effect. It doesn't necessarily need to be 4, it could be any of them, and that's the idea behind her builds mostly. She's either going to be Spurn tanking in the enemy phase, or she's going to act as Gale Force support. And albeit she doesn't get true damage from her Shamshir because Gale Force doesn't deal any damage, so that will go to waste. But she still makes for a fantastic Gale Force unit because of the fact that she has Times Pulse and Slang in her weapon. And then we get to Arena. The Arena builds are going to be relatively simple as well, albeit with a bit more expenses. But generally speaking, if you're going to be running her as your dual infantry unit for Arena, you'll probably want something like Ruptured Sky because that's a 2 cooldown special, and because of Shamshir's Slang and Times Pulse effects, you'll basically have Ruptured Sky ready to go all the time, which is wonderful because that can help take out dragon threats, beast threats, all sorts of melee threats too, but you might have to be careful. And the other skills I have are Close Call and Odd Tempest. Now Close Call may seem kind of funky when we have something like Spurn, which is arguably better, but this is going to be more so for hit and run strategies, because this is the hit and run variant of damage reduction. After she initiates combat, she can back up one space, and depending on your teammates, you can possibly get her out there with maybe a dance or reposition or something. Depending on how much you're scoring with each unit, there's a good chance they may have rallies, but if you have a dancer with you, it would benefit them greatly. And then Odd Tempest is just for the extra movement. This one is really nice because you can easily swoop in with 3 move, attack with Shamshir, and then get out. And then finally her seal is attack speed solo 3, which is just more attack and speed, because she would like that basically. Now, something you could also do is Gale Force on the first build, and then replace her seal with Flashing Blade. And as long as she can kill, she will have a much better time at hit and run strategies, because the 3 move from Odd Tempest, the 1 from Close Call, it's effectively 4 move in that sense. Although if you just want to run her as a full-on Gale Force unit for Arena Assault, for example, you could just give her Gale Force with Flashing Blade and Times Pulse. No Follow-Up is also really good in securing her doubles, as she will more than likely be able to double in most combats, especially with the +5 she gets from her weapon, and then the +4 from Swift Sparrow 2. And those are pretty much about it for Arena. The reason we chose Fire Season is because I believe that's where she has some of the better advantages when it comes to the legendary heroes. Water is definitely off the table because of all the high hitting blues. Wind wouldn't necessarily be a bad option either, but you still have to deal with threats such as legendary Corrin, Sigurd now, Lucina, so that one can be tough. Earth Season isn't really the best either because of the 2 heavy hitting blues and then the super fast bows, which can possibly hinder her ability to double them. And then Fire is mostly made up of greens and reds with just Ephraim and the blue category, so she does have better overall matchups when it comes to those, which is why I chose Fire. And then finally we have something for just regular PvE usage. If you were to use her in PvE content, you can easily still go with a Gale Force set, but also just run a Fury Desperation set, because that's not really the worst thing she can do. Albeit, it may take a couple combats to get her into the Desperation range, but that's really about it. That combined with Speed Smoke means she can easily reach her Flashing Blade 3 checks from her seal. And overall, it's a decent build for what you're trying to get out of her in PvE. Both of these builds are pretty much going to be using Desperation, because you really don't need a lot of the other Bs that she may have, especially for PvE content. Desperation's more than fine. And then for her second build, we have Moonbow with double Swift Sparrow and Defense Smoke, and this will help with her damage output overall. She won't need anything that accelerates her cooldown way more, because Shamshir has Slaying and Time Pulse, meaning she will always have instant Moonbow ready to go, no matter what happens. Swift Sparrow 3 and then Swift Sparrow 2 is just for more additional attack and speed, which is always a good thing when it comes to her role. Defense Smoke, just to lower the defense stat of the foes on the map, meaning she can hit even harder with Moonbows, and her true damage. And then Desperation, if you do end up in that range, you can always double the foe before they can retaliate, which should lead you to defeating them, as you'll always be proccing a Moonbow because of the sling. There are more Bs she can use, but I feel that because the bar for PvE content is really low, you really won't need much outside of like a couple basic skills or some like old meta stuff. And that's pretty much about it. Overall, I think Marisa is a very, very solid Gale Force unit. She's basically Gen 2 Navarre in a sense, with more damage output. And generally speaking, the Gale Force sets are going to be most beneficial in stuff such as Aether raids, but it can still be used in PvE content without question. But yeah, that's about it. If you enjoyed, make sure to let me know down below, and I'll see you next time.